All right, let's get started. First, thank you very much, Habib, for a generous super chat. Habib says Tesla Live is proudly sponsored by Habib the Dweed, Porsche Taycan. Amazing. This guy just doesn't give up. He wants to sell Porsches in Tesla spaces. Just not okay. Ali, how are you?
It's a great day to be a long-term Tesla investor, Yaman. How are you?
I'm doing well. Tesla stock is surging. Let's see what the latest price is right now. Up 7% at $318 per share. In the last 5 days, it's up 30%. And in the last 6 months, the stock has doubled. It's more like 5 months, actually. And then from the dip in April 2024, the stock is up 124%. Ali, where do you think the stock is headed?
Not really sure exactly. I mean, it could hit all-time highs. There are a lot of portfolio managers I've heard that are underweight, and nobody realized or nobody planned that Trump was not only going to win, but he was going to win the House and the Senate. So that's pretty good for the stock market, I think, and nobody really predicted that. So I think there's going to be a lot more buying pressure for them to buy as quickly as they can, at least before the end of the year. So they're not underweight.
Okay, so Tezali says that because institutional investment managers have been underweight Tesla, that they're going to rush to the door. Rush to buy the stock before year end. Why would they do that, Ali?
Well, I don't think they want to miss what's going to happen. I mean, there's maybe starting to take Tesla as an AI play. Could be. I mean, I don't really know the exact reason, but could be that. Could be that they don't want to miss out on what's going to happen with a Trump presidency and him reducing burdensome. What's the word I want to use? Regulation. So with him hopefully reducing regulation and it being a company-friendly administration, we could see lots of these tech stocks really take off.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ali, for coming up early on and sharing your views. And I'm interested in others' views as well. We have Omar on the board and Luce on the board as well. If you're liking this discussion and you want more like it, please head over to the YouTube channel and like and subscribe. Help us grow. And even if you're listening to the recording of this on YouTube, hit the like button. It really, really helps us out. Take a moment to do so. Only 2 seconds of your time, and doesn't cost anything to subscribe to the channel. Also, you can listen to Tesla Live now on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. After every episode, within the first hour, I post the audio recording on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and everybody has their own preferred method of consuming content. So you're welcome to like and subscribe in those channels. Leave a comment below the episode. We just started posting Tesla Live on those platforms, so we need your help to grow there as well. Luce, how are you? How are you feeling about this stock price surge?
Hey, what's up, everybody? Yeah, so this morning I've never been so tempted to sell my stock. I thought it will not go over 300, and I'm so happy that I didn't. Actually, never been so tempted before. The price is so high that I think even if it will go down, it has sedimented itself at least over 280, 270. So after all, I'm very happy with my decision.
Okay, so just to clarify, you sold your stock?
No, I resisted, mate. Like I was very tempted though.
Okay. So your point is that you were tempted to sell your stock this morning. Okay. Thank you for the insightful comment. Omar, welcome. How are you?
Hey, doing great.
Good. And we have Wes Wallen in YouTube live chat very early on as well. Thank you, Wes, for he is doing a AMA FSD. So about FSD, you can ask Wes anything you want. And Wes used to work at the Tesla Autopilot team. So great person to ask whatever FSD questions you have. Omar, what do you think about this stock price surge?
Yeah, I mean, we saw another 25 basis point rate cut yesterday. I'd been kind of concerned that perhaps we could see a pause or a slower period of rates coming down, but they're continuing their pace. It really seems like you have several tailwinds coming together here with the cost of capital, going down eventually, hopefully, as the Fed funds rate goes down. Um, you've got sort of a expectation of, I think, favorable tax policy, and just generally, I think a overhang that resulted in a lower valuation for the stock coming undone. The risk of, for example, prosecution, the risk of NHTSA just delaying FSD or not allowing FSD, that type of thing. It's really kind of delivered a value unlock for the company, and people are looking at this name in a different way now. So it's a $1 trillion company again, and there's going to be some ups and downs. Maybe it's getting a little ahead of itself here. The company hasn't changed at all, right? Only the market's perception has changed. But I think probably there'll be some ups and downs, probably some volatility, some very sharp up days, some very sharp down days. But I think as we see FSD scale across the world, as we see Optimus come to market, this thing is headed on a path back to all-time highs.
All right. Omar expects some ups and downs in the stock, but an all-time high price. So that would be about $420 per share. When, Omar? Omar, when do you expect an all-time high?
Sorry, what did you say?
When do you expect an all-time high in Tesla stock?
I have no idea. I can't predict what the market is going to do. I certainly didn't predict this. So, a lot of people try and predict what's going to happen and when. I don't try and do that. That's not what I do. What I'm good at doing is understanding technology on a fundamental level, and I buy and hold and I wait. And that's really the hard part. You have to wait for a long time. You have to talk for years about something, and everyone's just laughing at you, and the stock's going sideways, and they call you delusional. And then eventually, over time, these ideas hopefully start to play out, these long term trends. So I don't know when it's going to hit all time highs, but I think in the next 4 years, you're going to see a lot of great things happen for Tesla. This company's really entering a new era, and the new vehicles, the new more affordable models, the Cybercab, which is now on display in Silicon Valley and Santana Row, these are going to make the company's total production basically double from the levels they're at today.
Okay, thanks, Omar. Brian?
Hey, I'm sitting in my new Cybertruck. I haven't even driven it off the lot yet. I'm in Ottawa. There's got to be 50 of these stainless steel triangles parked around here. It's so crowded. And I'm just doing the checkout. Everything looks so awesome. Thanks, guys, for all you do. And I'll be listening to you on my 2-hour drive back to Kingston.
Brian, congrats on your Cybertruck. TSLA.
Did you see the latest from Joe Techmeyer? Just posted to his subscribers.
No, I
About
didn't.
the
Let's. What is
smaller,
it?
cheaper, but the smaller, cheaper vehicle that they're kind of nearing the end stages of development and testing, should be ready for production runs pretty soon. And they learned from their mistakes, Tesla did, of showing a vehicle and not having it be ready for delivery for years. So they're expecting it to um, first or second quarter be ready for delivery in the first and second quarter, right after they release it.
I mean, that's not news. We knew that the new Tesla, the new Model Y, that's kind of smaller, is coming in 2025, starting with China in Q1 and ramping throughout the year. So that would be in line with what we've been saying. So that's not new information. Or am I missing something, Ali?
Well, this wasn't for China. This was for Giga Texas.
Okay. So it's going to start production soon and ramp throughout next year, right?
Correct. They're
So
finishing
how is
their
that different from what I said?
Oh, you said China.
Okay. Omar, what do you think about that news?
Sorry, my girlfriend's buying a Tesla and she just got her financing offer approved, so I'm a little distracted. What was she say? What did you say?
Don't worry about it. Okay. So going back to the stock price discussion, Luce, why did you feel tempted this morning to sell your stock? Do you have a price in mind? But Omar is buying shares still. So you guys are kind of in the opposite point, parts of the spectrum at this point.
So can you repeat the question? Sorry.
Why did you feel tempted to sell the stock today?
I didn't think it would go over 300, honestly. And the fact that once it surpassed 300, it skyrocketed another 5-6%. I really didn't believe it. Because I'm in Europe, I own many shares in the European exchange, which means that basically I can freely sell basically pre-market. And so I'm very tempted when situations like this happens, because in my opinion it could open and go red, honestly. I don't think that Tesla I don't think 1 trillion is a fair valuation for Tesla right now, even with the easing of the regulation for robotaxi.
Can you elaborate on that? What do you mean by $1 trillion is not fair valuation for Tesla? And what do you think is a fair valuation?
So as Omar says, it's the same company it was 1 week ago. And the limiting factor of Tesla as a company is being able to release a robotaxi and the software. I really never thought that the regulation was the limiting factor. In fact, I think that once the software works and statistically is safer than a human, then the regulation doors will open themselves. So I didn't really think that Trump was key, and the regulations the ability of having easing regulations for robotaxi were key for the rise of a stock. Right now, in my opinion, it's just speculation. A fair price, in my opinion, is around $220.
220, is that what you said?
Yeah, for
Okay.
sure. Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Omar, what do you think about Luce's statement? Omar has been arguing that the stock is worth about $300 per share throughout recent months. That's a $300 share stock, and now the stock has risen above that. And Luce says it's not worth $1 trillion today. That the company is the same as last week, and he doesn't believe regulation was ever the limiting factor, which Omar has agreed before too. So, Omar, what in your mind has changed that you're buying shares at about $300 per share today?
Tesla is a multi-trillion-dollar company, and I think it's on track to become the most valuable company on earth. They're really going from being a product company to an economy company. Kind of like Apple. Apple was a product company. Then with the iPhone and the App Store, they became an economy company. They enabled a digital app economy. They get a cut of every credit card transaction through Apple Pay now. So Tesla's kind of in that transition. And what you're really emerging from is a period where, Tesla had enormous success. They achieved, first of all, people said you'll never be profitable selling these EVs. At a peak, they achieved automotive gross margin in excess of 30% during COVID, when there was essentially a supply shock. So when you're really looking at the core business earnings today, you're looking at a period where they were, in effect, a victim of their own success. They were so wildly successful that it made the industry dump a bunch of unprofitable BEVs on the market. That combined with rising interest rates, inflation, higher cost of goods sold, created a period of depressed margins. Now you're seeing cost of goods sold fall pretty consistently. I mean, just amazing numbers that the entire company has 35,000. Troy Teslike is estimating 32,000 for the Model 3 and Y, which is, just phenomenal. Obviously, they have engineering improvements that are going to continue to drive that down further. They've got new product introductions that are going to drive growth, whereas before they were dealing with decreasing economies of scale and all the costs associated with that. Now they're entering into more of a growth phase. All of these things are going to send the margins going in the other direction. And we now have 2 sequential quarters of margin expansion for the business, which is great. And I think really when you look at FSD, you look at the expansion of FSD worldwide, this makes the product much more differentiated, and it basically doubles the profitability. It basically doubles the value of the customer when a customer becomes an FSD customer. And they're addicted to you. They can't go to anybody else. So it's kind of like that shortage in a sense, that there's a shortage of autonomous cars. They can only be, bought from this one company. So really, when you look at the core business, the auto business, you're emerging from a period of depressed earnings. If you just try and plug in some numbers for margins that are between the peak and where you're at now, and just kind of, play around with where this could get in 2025, 2026, that's going to get you significantly higher than if you just do sort of a naive multiple of last year's earnings and say this is going to be indicative of what this looks like going forward. Of course, the energy business is expanding like crazy, but the real cash cows, Optimus, FSD unsupervised, they're not even on the P&L yet, right? So with a company like this, a lot of the valuation multiple you're seeing is just Musk himself. And well, what's he going to come up with? What's he going to do? What, you know, position is Tesla going to be in to capitalize on, whatever new federal initiatives emerge over the next 4 years with Musk as somebody who is a close confidant in the White House? So when you look at that, the valuation, I think, actually is looking pretty cheap. If I can buy a company that's going to be a $4 or $5 trillion company and it's only trading at $1 trillion today, then that's still a pretty good deal. Now, I don't necessarily chase Tesla stock when it's hitting new highs. I tend to want to buy more when it's crashing and people are actually negative on it. And people are saying, oh, Elon Musk's politics are destroying Tesla. And they're wrong. They're kind of missing it. They're just getting caught up in the emotion of the moment. That's when I love to buy. And, you buy and then it goes even lower and you buy more. And you're like, wait a minute, am I an idiot? Why do I keep buying this as it keeps going lower? And then you wait and eventually a day like this comes and those shares that you bought are 2 or 3 times higher than the price you bought it at.
Lucha, there you go. Did that ease your worries? Lucha, are you happier now?
Yeah, I'm happy, but I wanted to add
Lucha,
something.
can I just say something real quick before you
Yeah.
continue? As you were talking about how you were worried about your shares, we have a couple of feedback for you from the replies. Pete Balls to the Wall FSD says, and I'm quoting, "Get this clown off the stage." And then in YouTube live chat, we had Adam Van Est in capital letters says, "Sell your stock, buddy." So,
Well, I guess I'm gonna sell my stock then. I will follow their suggestion. No, so basically, another reason why I didn't sell and I talked about it is that I have a firm belief that the Republicans will sustain new sales for Tesla. I believe that the Q4 will surprise, and with the momentum of Mega, with the momentum of the Republicans, that we know many Democrats voted for Republicans as well. Tesla will likely buy Tesla and will open a new demographic. And this is one of the reasons why I think it will surprise and will sustain the price going forward.
Bull 2035.
Hey, Omar, you'll recall 5 years ago, 6 years ago, a lot of people said, well, I'll buy an EV if gas prices go too high. They were calculating gas prices. Do I buy an EV or not? Are we past that point where gas prices don't matter, where the EVs are just so good that who cares what the gas price is?
I think gas prices do matter. When gas prices go higher, people tend to buy EVs more. They go, you know what? I'm sick of this. I don't want to wait for this to go even higher. So that has been something that during COVID times accelerated EV sales. You saw gas prices shoot up to insane levels, if you can remember. As gas prices stabilized in the preceding years, that was also something that I think was a headwind to EV adoption. In a Trump administration, you're probably going to see lower gas prices and more favorable policies towards fossil fuel producers, and also lower fuel emission standards that are easier for legacy automakers to meet. So that is going to be a headwind to EV adoption in some sense, but I think energy markets are unpredictable. Maybe something could happen, that we don't expect, that could shoot prices up. There could be other economic factors, but obviously people are buying this for things like full self-driving, for the technology, for the performance. There are other reasons besides just the price of gas, and you can still save a lot of money even at these gas prices switching to an EV.
Bull.
And my last question, Omar, is do we expect Elon to advocate for reducing subsidies to oil companies?
I mean, Elon's position has been that we should eliminate all subsidies, whether it's to EVs, oil and gas companies, whatever. You generally don't want the government interfering in any market. And EVs are great and fossil fuels are not great. We want to move to them, away from them, I mean. But at the same time, we need fossil fuels to make EVs. We need fossil fuels to ship EVs today. It would be great if we could ship EVs around using Tesla semis, but we need to use diesel semis today, unfortunately. So diesel is part of the cost of an EV. So if fossil fuels are low and the cost of business is low and inflation is low and interest rates are low, then that also lowers the cost of business for Tesla. So, you do want EVs to be cheaper, but given that it's not really feasible to move entirely to EVs overnight. You have to make all those batteries and everything. Having a low cost of energy also has benefits across the economy, including for Tesla.
Omar, this stock is now worth more than $1 trillion. The last time the company was worth more than $1 trillion, Elon sold tens of billions of dollars of stock. Do you think he will sell shares again?
I think he's expressed a desire to retain more control of Tesla. I think he sees the value in what they're building. I don't know what he's going to do. I suppose he could sell shares for something if he needs to, but I think he really views his Tesla stake as eventually funding Mars colonization, maybe a decade or two down the line. And Twitter was kind of a rare thing. It was kind of unusual. I don't necessarily see him doing that, but he can always sell shares anytime he wants. But I think right now he's really trying to increase his stake to around 25%.
Okay. All right. Any other questions, comments on Tesla's stock price? Please request to speak. If you'd like to share your predictions, you're welcome to do so. Otherwise, we're going to switch topics. Okay. Let's go to, I really want your views on, it's very rare that Omar disagrees with Elon. Very rare. It's happened. I mean, I can't even think of an example. But yesterday, or maybe this morning, Elon reposted a post about ending the Fed with a 100 emoji showing his support for ending the Fed. And Omar responded, the Fed needs to be independent of politics. And I think this is going to be probably a major topic in the coming years, with Trump and his administration controlling both chambers of the Congress, and Elon's support around cryptocurrency in the past. I think there's going to be some initiatives around this topic. Omar, what are your thoughts about this topic? And do you expect that the Trump administration will be able to end the Fed?
I think Elon is kind of looking at this from a position of he and his buddy just got into the White House, and he would love for the president to have unilateral control over rates. For example, if you can fire the Fed Reserve chair, you can just keep firing them until they enact the monetary policy you want. But the Federal Reserve has been structured deliberately in a way to shield it from political influence. You want monetary policy being set based on the Fed's dual mandate, not based on who's in office, right? I mean, it may sound like a good idea when you're coming into the White House, but when it's some other idiot, you don't want them lowering the target rate just to help them get some votes, right? So, you can criticize the Fed. Certainly, the Fed isn't perfect. They try to do the best they can. But I do believe that an independent Fed is probably what's best for the U.S. economy compared to a politicized Fed.
Okay. So, but you do think that Trump and Elon will try to end it?
I don't know. I mean, it seems kind of out there. We'll have to see, but I would think probably a substantial number of Republicans would support an independent Fed.
What would need to happen in Congress? So the Fed technically reports to the Congress. The Congress is the Fed's boss in a way. What would have to happen? Like, how many votes do they need to end the Fed?
Yeah, I don't really know. I mean, the Federal Reserve is sort of like a half public, half private institution. So the Federal Reserve is the bank of banks. It was created by an act of Congress with half of the board of governors set by presidential appointments and the member banks also being involved, right? So the banks have a seat at the table. It's sort of like a private institution representing the banks, but it's also has some government involvement as well with the federal government, but it's separate from the federal government. And the United States government has their bank accounts at the Federal Reserve, and other banks have bank accounts at the Federal Reserve. That's how they kind of, you know, do business with each other. The Federal Reserve can kind of create money out of thin air just by putting more money into their database. And I think they're also in charge of printing money. So I think an act of Congress could make changes to or probably repeal or change the Federal Reserve. That would obviously require passing the House, passing the Senate, withstanding a Democratic filibuster, and then getting the president's signature.
Yeah, exactly. I was just asking ChatGPT. To dismantle or significantly change the Fed, both chambers of the US Congress would need to pass a bill proposing such changes. The number of votes needed depends on the specific legislative process. House or Reps, a simple majority is required to bill to pass. Senate, a simple majority is needed to pass the bill. However, if there is a filibuster, 60 votes would be required to invoke cloture and proceed to a final vote and then presidential approval. The president would need to sign the bill into law. If the president vetoes the bill, the Congress can override the veto with a two-thirds majority in both chambers, 290 in House and 67 in Senate. So it looks like the limiting factor here could be 60 votes in the Senate, 60 out of 100. Given the significant economic implications, this type of legislation would likely face considerable debate and scrutiny. Okay, Yoda?
Yeah, I think maybe really what's underlying is that the Fed needs to be modernized rather than removed altogether. I think they have important toggles to the economy, and I don't think, given the track record of the U.S., you'd want to just throw that away. But I do think that there has been debate around the type of data that they look at, whether they're trailing, indicators or forward-looking indicators, their stance on adopting, digital currencies um, and the transparency of what data they're looking at and how they make their decisions. So I think, yeah, maybe it's more of a reform rather than a throwaway.
Luce?
So what is happening with the Fed really reminds me of what happened with the ex supercharger team. Doesn't matter how well you work, you can be extremely good, but you are under Elon now, and you basically need to do, or basically you need to be like on his command. So he's basically showing who is the boss, basically.
Yoda, let me ask you something. So you said instead of ending the Fed, maybe some reforms are needed. If you were in control, what reform would you implement tomorrow?
I think the speed in which they make these adjustments, that needs to be accelerated. So I think when the rates needed to be reduced, I think they should have acted faster. But I think more practically, I think just making everything much more transparent in terms of the data that they're looking, uh, how they're making decisions, how the board is making the decision. Those are definitely things that will move the Fed forward into the modern age.
Well, Powell would tell you that they not only look at trailing data, but also concurrent data and also leading data. So by what you just said, I mean, they're already satisfied, right?
Right, but we may not know the weighting that they put on the various data to then inform the decision, and I think that could be made more transparent.
Well, he would tell you that the weighting changes.
Yeah, so capture the changes, and why they changed, the way they did. I think those are, those were things that would kind of make things more transparent.
Well, he does do that in press conferences in a way when
Mm.
he talks about, we're looking at the job openings, or in another meeting, he can talk about core PCE, etc. So I think those things are already happening. It's just that it sounds like you're looking for a specific mathematical formula that will remain constant. Is that what you want?
Yeah, like show me the algorithm, the formula that is used to make these decisions.
Well, there is no
Um,
algorithm right now. There is no formula that is used to make these decisions. You're saying that there should be a specific formula.
I think so. I think so. Ultimately,
Okay.
there's decisions are made, and when they use words that are more qualitative, I think that's subject to interpretation. And so what happens is you end up getting these surprises like the 50 basis points on the first cut, um, that kind of throw people off, or you get delays in the first rate cut. um, and yeah, I think it can be just more modernized, rather than these sort of
Well, I
very
mean, there is a
traditional.
formula that
Mhm.
people kind of point to every now and then, um, about where the rates
Mm.
should be. And that formula is called the Taylor rule. So the Federal Reserve does not use a single mathematical formula to set interest rates, but relies on a combination of economic models, data analysis, and judgment. However, one commonly referenced rule that illustrates how central banks, including the Fed, might guide their decisions is the Taylor rule. The Taylor rule provides a formulaic approach to setting the federal funds rate based on economic conditions. The Taylor rule is expressed as a function of nominal federal funds rate. Sorry, that's the output. Function of the real equilibrium interest rate, R star, the current inflation rate, the target inflation rate, the log of the actual GDP, and the log of potential GDP. Now, that one shortcoming of this formula, obviously, is the potential GDP is an estimate. And this Taylor rule would lead you to a higher than 0% interest rate coming out of the Great Recession. So, according to this formulaic approach, you would have had set the rates much higher than where the Fed had to do, in addition to quantitative easing, to get the economy going into, up to speed again. So that's, I think, the part of the issue with these mathematical formulas is that there are usually regime changes, every now and then, that that deem these mathematical formulas, um, not usable anymore. So, what kind of mathematical formula would you recommend that you believe will sustain over the coming centuries?
I think whatever data they're looking at, expose that to us. I mean, even if you look at the election, when the tallies are coming out, you can drill down to a state, drill down to the county level, and look at the votes. Um, Basically, like the data science aspect, uh, you know, of how these decisions are made, I think that could be made more transparent.
Okay, so you don't have a mathematical formula in mind, but you think the Fed should adopt a mathematical formula.
I think so. Yeah,
Okay, so then why don't you have a mathematical formula in mind? You just haven't done the research, or what?
I've done research.
So why do you think that the Taylor rule shouldn't be the mathematical formula?
Yeah, I think I can look into that more, but yeah, I haven't looked into the formula. I just think that right now it's dominated by these press conferences and these paragraphs where people are analyzing which word has changed, and these changes are based on data that they're looking at, that some of which are open, but some of which are not. And and then the panel makes a decision. So it can be more transparent, in my opinion.
Okay. Have you ever read the Beige Book?
No.
So then how do you know some of this data is not open to the public if you haven't read even what they put out today?
Yeah, you have a good point.
Okay. Omar, what do you think about this discussion?
Sorry, we're trying to arrange financing. Delivery day's Monday.
Do you want to? Okay, if you can't contribute as a speaker, you can move yourself down to listener. I assume everybody who's on speaker mode is able to contribute when I ask them to contribute. So if there's anyone on the speaker board who can't contribute, move yourself down to listener mode. Any other questions, comments about the Fed? You're welcome to request to speak. The Tesla stock is up 9%, coming up to 10% at $325 per share. Overall markets are at up 1%. Dow Jones, Nasdaq is flat, S&P 500 up 0.5%. Aside from Tesla, all other big tech stocks are down. It's actually a pretty defensive day today in the stock market, which is interesting. The yields are down as well. 10-year Treasury yields to 4.30%. 30-year down 7 basis points to 4.48. These yields are actually lower today than they were before the election, which is amazing. All right. Luce, what methods do you use to value Tesla stock? So your estimate was $220 per share. How did you reach the estimate?
Well, yeah, man. So I've been following Tesla for years, okay, and I study every annual report and quarter report. So honestly, I don't really have anything like I can say by memory. But I can say that if I had to buy right now, I would consider doing so only 220 basically, based on the fact that the company is reducing COGS, based on the fact that, in my opinion, they are increasing sales in China and in USA, in my opinion, and the fact that energy and so on. So basically, this is like a gut feeling and the opinion of someone who's been following for a long time.
Okay. Maruder.
Yeah. Hey, can I have some comments on the Fed? Because I kind of joined in a little bit late.
Hey, I usually keep new speakers to a question,
Uh,
but if you're going to keep your comments brief, you can go ahead.
I just wanted to say, and this leads into a question: if we do abolish the Fed, what comes after? Because I think the whole purpose of it was Congress. They had their hands tied. They had so much control over the Treasury, but they were also doing a whole bunch of other stuff. So they just kind of they created the Fed to kind of like take care of itself, so to speak, so that it wasn't directly Congress controlling the flow of money and the money supply and everything. So what comes after it if we decide to end it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I agree with that characterization. I think purpose of the Fed is to separate monetary policy from politics. It's not necessarily that Congress just had too much on its plate. And I don't have an answer for what comes after. I haven't heard really. I mean, that's what I was trying to get from Yoda, is that what do you think needs to be done? What would you do? What's the mathematical formula if you think there should be a mathematical formula? And I didn't get a response. And I haven't really heard anyone who's forced ending the Fed what the next stage is. So, but Elon has talked about obviously Doge or other cryptocurrencies being a primary part, or maybe kind of like a post-dollar kind of world. I guess that's the idea. I'm not sure though. I don't want to put words in his mouth. That's just my guess of what he's thinking. But yeah, it would be helpful if people who support ending the Fed put forth a specific plan. Luce?
Hey, Yaman, so why don't you tell us what is, in your opinion, the right valuation for Tesla right now? I'm curious.
Yeah, let's stick with this topic right now, and then we can switch to that. Maruder, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah. If I mean, so the Fed, you brought up a really good point that the Fed kind of is multifurcating. It does different purposes. Um, I mean, if not the Fed who does those purposes, I mean, this is kind of more of a follow-up. Who takes care of the economy, and who takes care of the governmental interests that the Fed would normally take care of or be concerned with?
Yeah, I think that's what I just answered. I don't know what the plan is from the people who want to end the Fed. So I'm looking for more clarification. So if there's anyone who's more familiar with the end the Fed movement and who has an idea of what is next being proposed, then you're welcome to request to speak and share your views. Sorry, I couldn't answer your question. All right. Thank you for coming up. Luce, what do I think the fair value is today? You're asking the wrong person. I thought that the stock was going to triple in 2022 and obviously didn't. So I'd rather not really answer that question right now. All right. Any other questions, comments? Please request to speak. In other news, Rivian announced results. Rivian stock is up 2% today at around $10 per share, $10 billion. About $7 billion of that is cash. So the company is still putting, there's still a bit of positive enterprise value here for Rivian. The deliveries are down year over year, but the company reiterated a contribution margin positive Q4, which is the next quarter, or the current quarter, really. So we'll see if they can achieve that. I listened to RJ's interview on CNBC, and he pointed to that their raw material cost per vehicle is down very substantially. But this is true for other automakers as well that are producing EVs, like Tesla has shown significant drop in year over year and quarter over quarter unit cost, and that's primarily due to battery cost declining. So the Rivian doesn't seem to have made much progress going from the original R1 to the second generation R1 vehicles, in my opinion. But if there are other Rivian investors in the audience, they want to talk about Rivian, they want to point to something I may have missed, they're welcome to request to speak. Daniel, go ahead.
I wanted to ask, what do you think is the effect of potential Trump tariffs and what was it? Well, how is it going to? So the Trump tariffs and reduction of regulation and the EV tax credit affecting competitors, which basically establishes Tesla as like a monopoly because nobody can produce cars profitably in this kind of environment.
Yeah, I mean, even before Trump tariffs, Tesla is the only automaker that's able to produce electric vehicles, pure electric vehicles in volume and profitably.
Yeah. So on top of that, now, I'm wondering if the stock is ripping also because of that.
Yeah, I actually I think a tariff war would be negative for the world, in my opinion.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for
Okay.
sure.
So if Trump brings very significant tariffs, and then on top of that, China retaliates, and Europe has its own thing going on in process right now. They're adding tariffs to imports from China. So if we get to a world where, prices of vehicles are rising and the only beneficiary is governments around the world collecting tariffs, then that's a huge problem for investors, equity investors, and the consumers as well. But as we discussed in previous episodes, it's possible that Trump is kind of throwing around these major statements about 200% tariffs as a negotiation tactic, that a chip that he's going to use later on in negotiations. So I think that's TBD, to be determined. We'll see. Like, I think Powell did a good job in the press conference, which we watched here in Tesla Live together yesterday, about answering questions around how will you approach fiscal policy. Powell was specifically asked about Trump's proposed policies, and he said, we're not going to guess, but we're monitoring. And when we see specific steps being taken, then they will monitor. I think we're several months away from the Fed changing policy according to what happens on the fiscal side, because the fact is, a lot of campaign promises are made from both sides. I suspect most of those will not materialize ever, because it's just crazy talk. But and there are checks and balances, even though Republicans control both chambers of the Congress going forward for the next 2 years at least. The Democrats can still filibuster the process, or some Republicans may break away from their party in voting for these things. So there's a lot that we're going to find out in the coming months. So it's TBD. I wouldn't bank on that yet. I don't think the Tesla stock is surging because of tariffs on other automakers. All right. Any other questions, comments? Please request to speak. I earlier asked a question about which will go bankrupt first, Rivian or Lucid. There are a lot of Rivian fans, so people mostly guessed Lucid, but I think Rivian will go bankrupt first, because I think Lucid has essentially endless amount of capital from Saudi Arabia. So this question is at the top of our screens. It had 3 dozen answers already. You're welcome to reply to it. And if somebody wants to propose a coffee bet, which one will go first? I think Rivian will go bankrupt first, and Lucid will survive for a while. I mean, essentially, Lucid is majority owned, mostly owned by Saudi Arabia, so it's essentially a private company at this point anyway. All right. That covers everything I wanted to discuss. If there are no other questions, comments, we'll end the space. I also wanted to do a watch party in a couple of hours, listening to the Rivian earnings call. So if any of our speakers want to join that watch party through StreamYard, that's going to be on YouTube. Please respond to the DM group and let me know that you want to join as a speaker. Luce?
So I don't know if you already discussed this, but what do you think is the morale at Rivian, looking at the fact that Scout basically completely copied or basically bought their design? Like, the morale must be so low, so low.
I don't know what the question is. Bull?
Hey, I had a question for JC. He's been doing a number of road trips on FSD across the country, and I just wanted to get some of his feedback on what he likes about it, what he doesn't like, things he's noticed that have improved.
JC?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Bull. Yeah, I will tell you that road tripping in a Tesla is just amazing. I made a couple of posts about it, but it's from the supercharger network, I had 100% ability, and I went to some pretty doggone remote places in Utah and Colorado, had to do 100% charge maybe only twice. and still showed up with 20% plus at the next one. So great from that aspect. I used FSD for all but 7 miles of a 40, what is it? I guess it was around 4,500 miles that I covered over a 2-week period. And it was great. I mean, probably the one that impressed me the most, Bull, was I was at a place called Monarch Mountain in central Colorado, and unfortunately, I kind of got stuck there in the middle of the night when a snowstorm came through that had not been forecast, and FSD got me all the way down Monarch Mountain, with the exception of about a half a mile where I wanted to just test out FSD to make sure that it was reacting positive. But at the end of the day, I knew it was going to be safer than me going down that damn mountain at 11,000 feet. And it was. It took me all the way down. So it's been great.
Bull.
So you mentioned snow. Did the FSD drive through snow? How did it do? And what other weather did it drive through?
So fortunately for me, there was not a lot of snow yet. The storm had just started coming through, and I saw the snow trucks go in the opposite direction. So fortunately for, I did not go through, snow on the road, so to speak. So obviously Lincoln could probably speak better to that. But definitely had flurries coming through. There was some sleet on the road, and it handled that great. Now it was going slow as hell. I had it on automatic set speed offset, and it was choosing about 27 miles per hour, and in a stated speed of 55 miles an hour. So it knew something was up, and I just trusted the software. I had to, because it was better at that than me. I'm from zero elevation, Southeast Texas. So yeah.
Bull.
Hey, JC, how did it handle? So you're saying you're going 27 miles an hour. How did it handle the other drivers on the road? I assume some people were trying to go faster.
Yeah, it didn't care.
And the last question I have is, I mean, you did 4,500 miles. A lot of folks in this space own Teslas, but I don't think a lot of people have done the cross country road trips. Can you just describe how easy it is to put in your Tesla to make sure it gets from charging station to charging station?
Yeah, I've told somebody on X who asked the question, like, what do I need to do to prepare for a long road trip in my Tesla? And I told them, enter your final destination. That's it. I said, number one, enter your final destination. Number two, open the door. Done.
Okay. Bull, any comments around the Fed or Tesla stock price?
The only thing I'd say about the Fed, Ron Paul, the former congressman, wrote a book in 2009. I haven't read it for a long time, but if you want to find out where they're coming from, I think Ron Paul is probably where to look.
Okay. Marty posted a link to a Grok response to the question, what would be the next steps after ending the Fed? Who takes care of the economy and government interests? What does the end the Fed movement have in mind? Now that Trump is president-elect and he has talent like Elon Musk and maybe Ron Paul, what's next? And the response that came from Grok is, I'm gonna run the Fed. No, I'm kidding. That's not the response. Next steps after ending the Fed. 1. Transition to an alternative monetary system. Commodity-based currency. Some proponents advocate for returning to a gold standard and another commodity-backed currency system where the money supply would be tied to physical assets like gold, potentially reducing inflation by limiting money creation. Free banking system. Others might suggest a system where banks can issue their own currency, which would compete in the marketplace, aiming to foster competition and stability through market forces other than central control. Role of Treasury. Department of Treasury could take over many of the Fed's roles. Yikes. That's the opposite of separating politics from monetary policy. 3. Government economic management. Fiscal policy over monetary policy. With the Fed gone, fiscal policy will become the primary tool for managing the economy. This might mean more government spending adjustments, tax policies, and budget balancing acts to influence economic conditions. All the time reform, a comprehensive audit of existing financial systems might be conducted. The end the Fed movement vision. Liberty and free market. The movement often emphasizes reducing government control over the economy, advocating for free market principles where private entities and individuals can engage in economic activities with less interference from a central bank. Elimination of inflation. They argue that without the Fed manipulating interest rates and money supply, there would be less inflation or deflation, leading to price stability. Okay. Transparency and accountability. Ending the Fed would, in their view, remove a secretive entity from controlling the nation's monetary policy. Implications with Trump's election and Musk's involvement. Government Efficiency Commission. Trump has discussed forming a commission to audit federal operations with figures like Elon Musk potentially involved. This could align with efforts to dismantle the Fed if the part of a broader push towards reducing government involved in the economy. Policy direction, tax and tariff policies, innovation, cryptocurrency. With Musk's interest in technology and innovation, there might be an exploration of promotion of alternative financial systems like cryptocurrencies. Potential actions, legislation, and public expert debate. Okay, I mean, this is pretty much what we said. Interesting. Let's bring in Isaac Laterel. Isaac, I believe, used to be part of the Congress. Isaac, you were a House rep, right?
House rep in South Dakota, the state house.
Awesome. What do you think about this topic?
I've followed the Fed movement for a long time, and if anybody goes to the origin of how the Fed was created, they can see that it was a multi-year push by extremely powerful people. And although it is interesting that everybody's talking about it, it's like one of the biggest pipe dreams with this narrow majority that Republicans have. Like, Republicans are not in favor of ending the Fed. There's far too many people connected with banks who are in the government. So the likelihood that something like this could take place legislatively is zero. Because the Fed is essentially the US dollar. So you'd actually have a better chance doing it through technology than you would through legislation.
Okay, thank you. Nick?
Yeah, hey Yaman, how you doing? I just wanted to add one other thing to what Bull said. So when you do a trip, some people have run into where it's not planning their route for them. There's a setting in the navigation where you have to put on the trip planner. So you have to make sure the trip planner's on as well.
Okay, thank you.
Want to add that.
Okay, I want to focus on the Fed conversation right now. Isaac, can you elaborate on why the probability of ending the Fed through legislation is zero? And what would happen, for example, if the Senate introduced an anti-Fed bill and a House introduced an anti-Fed bill with the total control of the Congress that Republicans now have? What would happen next?
It probably would not receive a hearing in committee because there's very few members of Congress who are in favor of this. They don't form a majority on any committee. And even if they did, I think that the leadership, who certainly is not on board with this idea, would not allow that committee chairman to do as they pleased in this case. So if you just looked at the number of congressmen, for example, who have made a statement that even says audit the Fed, it's a very low number of people, and it would not represent a majority of any House committee.
Thank you very much. That's really, really helpful, and it's awesome to have you on the speaker board. So you said you were a House rep in South Dakota, Republican member. Before I get your views on election results, let's get the hand from Bull. Bull, go ahead.
Hey, Yaman, I had a question for the former representative about Republicans and Tesla. Can I ask that?
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So Isaac, you're a Republican. You're in a conservative state. Have you noticed any? And you probably have a lot of conservative friends. Have you noticed any difference about their attitude towards Tesla, given Elon's changes?
Yeah, definitely. Most of the elected folks who are in a small state, a small conservative state like South Dakota, have warmed up to Elon Musk in the past year because of his efforts. But I can say that when I was serving, a lot of the time, most of the conversations that you would have with Republican or conservative members, they would generally believe the narratives that would say, you know, that basically they still believe that Elon was with the left and he's for subsidies and he's for, you know, radical climate change policies, things like that. So there was a lot of information gap before he really started taking his turn toward helping the Republicans win this election.
Thank you, Isaac. Bull, did you have a follow-up?
Yes, we listened to a conservative speaker who Yaman will recall from Texas, who was making fun of the Cybertruck. I'm curious to see your Republican friends in South Dakota. Have you heard any feedback on the Cybertruck?
Just anecdotally here and there, there is actually a surprising number of Cybertrucks roaming around South Dakota.
Okay, great.
So people have been seeing them a lot. But even in Texas, when I visit my friends in the legislature down there, they still kind of make fun of the Cybertruck. Texas is a real big oil state, and so you can imagine that even coming around to Elon is one thing, but actually taking the time to spend time with the technology, when the engineering, which is why I like Tesla, it's because of the excellent engineering at play there. I think there's still a lot of education that they would need to do to themselves to dispel the myths that the mainstream media has been sharing about Tesla, because they generally ascribe all the negative aspects of EVs from other automakers to Tesla when they don't actually apply in most cases. So there's still an information gap there when it comes to the actual products I've found.
Thank you, Isaac. It's really good to have you on the board. Do you have another 10, 20 minutes?
I can stick around for a little bit.
Okay, perfect. Before that, I got to give a shout out to my sponsors. This space is sponsored by Pay More. It's actually hosted on a laptop provided by Pay More. At Pay More, you can buy the latest gadgets at great prices, sell or trade your used electronics for cash or store credit, and recycle your old broken devices responsibly, helping reduce electronic waste. And Tesla Live is proudly sponsored by Joa, your go-to source for premium Tesla accessories. At Joa, you'll find innovative charging solutions, stylish interior upgrades, protective gear, and cutting-edge tech add-ons. Use promo code TSLA Live at checkout for a 5% discount. Thank you, Joa, and thank you, Pay More, for sponsoring Tesla Live. I see we have a hand from JC, and we also have a question from our longtime supporter of the space, Kevin King, for Isaac. Isaac, Kevin asks, would it be possible to pass an amendment for balanced budget? Does Isaac think a balanced budget amendment could be passed?
Thanks for the question. I don't know if you're asking this because you're aware of the efforts that have been going on since the Reagan era, trying to pass a balanced budget amendment to the U.S. Constitution. A lot of states have actually passed balanced budget amendments. South Dakota is a state that does require their budget to be balanced. But I spent many years trying to get an amendment passed to the U.S. Constitution that starts from the states, because when my colleagues and I looked around at the people going to Congress, we didn't see the incentives were aligned for congressional people to pass an actual balanced budget amendment. They don't want to give up their ability to spend money. And in fact, the donors who place the congressman there in most cases certainly don't want them advocating for something that would limit their ability to propose more spending. So I think if we do get a balanced budget amendment, that would most likely come from the states, which have themselves the right to propose that amendment. And then the states or the people would then ratify it. So there is a way to get the amendment if 2/3 of the states get together on it, but I don't see it coming from Congress, because the makeup of the person who's in Congress has not shifted substantially. Just because one party, won a majority on the big issues that matter, which is empowering you to make decisions versus Congress making decisions, both parties generally agree they'd like to keep the power in Washington, D.C. And something like a balanced budget amendment shifts the power away from them, so they're not going to be incentivized to pass it. But there are efforts going forward to pass term limits, to pass balanced budget, and things like that come from state legislatures, and I think those have a better chance of succeeding.
Thank you, Isaac. JC, did you have a question for Isaac?
No, I actually just had a kind of an observation. He mentioned there was an information gap around Elon, and I would just say that what happened a couple of nights ago is either mostly or entirely due to Elon. So I would respectfully say to Congressman, maybe remind his colleagues that Elon plays to win, and when he does play, he wins. So I would just, that there might be some coming around that needs to be done.
Thank you, JC. Isaac, question for you. Elon has thrown out the number $2 trillion that he thinks he can cut from the budget. Do you think this is feasible?
I think it's completely feasible when it comes to would the government still operate and would people still be happy with the services? Yes, absolutely. There's that much fraud and waste easily to be found in the federal government. Another part of that component would be shifting some of those functions back to the state governments, because most of the things that the federal government does, if it's inside the border of the US, it's actually redundant with features of state governments. I think the founders really imagined that the federal government would primarily deal with issues that were outside the borders of the US, and then people would be able to choose in their own local home state what they would do inside the borders of their state. So it's feasible, definitely, but it would be a huge fight to, when Elon gets in there and starts proposing cuts, I think you'll find the gears of government will grind to a halt, and there will be a huge battle about it. And I don't have confidence that it will, end up going to the tune of $2 trillion of budget cuts. I think there will be some progress made, and it'll be substantial, but I don't think it'll be $2 trillion. And I think that there'll be a huge fight when that committee forms, and you'll see, how deep the roots of the swamp go.
That's amazing. Thank you very much for coming up to speaker board. Let's talk a little bit about Elon's role in the Trump administration. Do you expect a direct role, a direct participation in the cabinet, or do you think it's going to be more around the kind of advisory role?
Oh, that's an interesting one. What do you think about that?
I don't know even I don't have even 1% of the experience that you have. So I think you'd better answer, you would be better positioned to answer this question. But in previous spaces, we've discussed that Elon would probably take an advisory role, but I'm not 100% sold on that idea, because he's been very involved in tweets, in conversations. He was sitting with the president-elect at the table the night of the elections. And since then, there's been tweets that even Elon was involved in conversations with the Zelensky to end the war. So this doesn't appear to be an advisory role to me, but what do you think?
Yeah, I was talking about this with my wife last night, and during the campaign when Vivek was still running and seemed like he had this outside chance to become the nominee, he was gaining a lot of ground. Elon really said a lot of nice things about him, both because they both have the entrepreneurial experience, and also that Vivek was willing to say large scale changes. So I think that what will probably end up happening is that Vivek or somebody like him will get an official position, a full-time position, trying to execute the changes, trying to run the department, make severe cuts, all that kind of stuff. And then Elon would work with Vivek on sort of a advisory committee that would meet every so often, or that would meet for a few months at a time. So I think it'll be similar to the way that he goes to SpaceX, gets on the production line, figures out what's going on, and then once they, get past that really critical part, somebody else kind of takes over and continues the implementation. So that would be my guess. Also, I think there'll be some some legal realities if he were to become a federal government employee that would really mess up a lot of the things he was doing. So I would guess he would be prohibited from becoming a federal employee, but I see him working with someone like Vivek who would become like a cabinet member.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Bull 2035.
Yeah, for the representative, can you talk about your experience teaming up with private sector people, kind of as captains of industry, writing regulations, changing laws, and how important you can have an outsized impact even as an outsider, such as Elon?
Trying to take maybe a little bit different approach. Hopefully it'll answer your question, but when you go inside the US Capitol or a state capitol and you start looking at how the laws and regulations are written, you realize that the expertise and the amount of time spent by the actual elected people is quite low compared to the professionals who are paid, in many cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars to spend their full-time job defending their industry or their company's regulations and helping other representatives who are elected to write laws. So a lot of the regulation writing and law writing is delegated by the representatives to professionals who represent their companies or represent the industry. And when I was in the South Dakota House, I faced this very issue because I saw that the transportation organization, the one that gets money from the auto dealers and the truck dealers and all the people like that, they were writing a regulation that had a provision in it that would ban a company from opening a showroom in a mall. And as you guys know, Tesla at that time had a lot of showrooms, and they still have some showrooms in malls around the country. But I felt that this was a backhanded way to try to stop Tesla from, if they wanted to come to South Dakota, eventually opening up a showroom, because it required anybody who did that to have a full-on like auto dealer's license, set up exactly like the legacy automakers, basically, in order to do something simple like display your car in a mall. So I brought this issue up with the other representative, and what happened was we got into a room, in a back room, and he brought in the two people who he was helping, push this bill forward, and they were like two people from that exact industry. And I said, hey guys, I think this blocks Tesla from doing this. And they're like, no, it doesn't do that. And I happen to be somewhat friendly with the representative. And I just kind of looked at the language and I said, I think this, I respectfully disagree. I think that this language would prohibit them. And so I offered an amendment to him and to this group of people. And they said, please don't pass this amendment. It's not needed. Okay, if it's not needed, why are you against it? He said to them. And surprisingly, he decided to go with my opinion, even though I didn't work on the bill. I just noticed it as it was coming through the process. And because they claimed it didn't affect Tesla, they were kind of stuck. So when it came to the floor, he ended up backing my amendment. And because him and I ended up being in agreement, all the other members who hadn't really studied it, they just adopted the amendment, and we were able to fix that bill. But the interesting thing about it is that it wasn't his idea originally to pass this, whatever this regulation change was in the first place. It was the idea of the auto industry. They wanted this change, and when they go find somebody to back their bill, as long as nobody finds like a big issue with it, it ends up going through most of the time. So that's just kind of how the process works. A lot of those things are pushed by people who get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to spend their full time working on like one issue, and the elected people get paid far less, and they have far less time to focus on those issues. So they do rely on those industry folks. I think that's backwards. I think there's a better way to do it, but that's how it is today.
Thank you, Isaac. Going back to the elections, what were your kind of takeaways? Were the results in line with what you expected?
I'm one of those people who doesn't have a lot of faith in the election laws around the country. I don't have as much visibility in every state, of course, but I just felt uneasy that we would be able to have an election that would be resolved quickly. So me personally, I was very surprised that it was resolved quickly because I expected there to be a lot more arguing going on.
Okay, thank you. And how do you think Trump's policies will shift in the new term, especially compared to his previous administration?
It seems like having folks like Tulsi, RFK, Vivek, people who add a lot more intellectual horsepower to the process, having people like Elon involved. In the first term, it was basically Trump and his gut instinct versus the establishment who pretended to work with him. And that did not turn out very good, I don't think. But this time, I think there's a lot more folks like Elon Musk, like Vivek, who do know the intricacies of the Constitution and policy, who are going to help him. And because Trump has seen through the past 8 years which people stab him in the back, et cetera, et cetera, I do think there's going to be a better policy proposals that come forward, but he still, runs the risk of picking people who will stroke his ego, but not end up being people on the right side of the policies. So I think it'll be better.
Thank you. What do you say to people who say, I used to work with Trump in his cabinet, and now I'm not supporting him. I voted for the other side. He's not a good guy. What do you make of those comments? I think there's a few dozen people who has made that comment or something similar to that publicly in recent months.
And this is coming from a person who has not been a Trump supporter, not been a Trump fan, very critical of him, tried to support someone different, even when he first ran. But I will say that generally speaking, it reveals the number of people who work in the system are tied to the system. So the best thing about him happened to be that he didn't know any of these people and he didn't work with any of them. And so he wasn't really going along with the system, and he created just kind of a disruption that caused more people to pay attention to what was happening. But whenever you have people who have worked in government, let's say their entire lives or the majority of their careers, it's not surprising when they would criticize somebody that they work for. It doesn't mean all their criticisms are incorrect. Like, I think Trump has a lot of character flaws, and so sometimes people would notice that, oh, he doesn't read the reports, or he's lazy, or he only cares about things if they're on TV. Like, there is stuff like that, but I really think you have to look at, is this person a product of the swamp? And if they are, I'm not really going to listen to their opinion, good or bad. But if they're a person who has paid a personal price for standing up to corruption, let's say like Tulsi or RFK or Edward Snowden, I think those people's opinions are much more valid, and they criticize Trump and they praise him in other ways. So I would say, look at the person. Are they a person who's a creature of the swamp, live their life in the establishment system, or are they somebody who has proven that they've paid a price standing up against corruption?
Thank you. Do you think Elon's involvement with Trump administration could lead to issues around Tesla's international growth if Trump takes more of a protectionist approach in economic policy?
I personally think that Elon will stay out of anything that applies directly to Tesla. I mean, he'll make his opinion known on X like he does before, but I don't think he's going to mess around with tariffs and trade. I think he's just saying, my sole focus is try to reduce the budget issues, because if we don't get spending under the control, then our country is in real financial trouble. So I think he'll keep his focus to that for the most part.
Thank you very much. All right. Any other questions for Isaac? Please request to speak. Isaac, do you think Trump will end EV tax credit when he comes to office?
I think the other automakers want to end it right now, honestly. So I can see that as something that would be phased out. But it's really tough to tell. It didn't go very well for the big three automakers. They were the ones who pushed for it. They were the ones who wanted it because they wanted to get those huge subsidies. So now that they see that it's really in Elon's favor, I definitely think there will be a change to it. I don't think it will help Tesla, and I think Elon will probably be in favor of changing it and or reducing it. So because of those reasons, because the Elon haters don't like it, and because Elon himself doesn't really like it, I think it'll end up changing in some fashion.
Interesting. Thank you. What policies can Trump implement to accelerate EV adoption? That's part A, and then part B to accelerate autonomy development.
Wow. Yeah, I am really optimistic about the autonomy part. I think that there is a chance for nationwide autonomous licensing now that the administration went the way it did, and because Elon's in favor of it. Obviously, everybody wants autonomy, but in the same way you saw the big three automakers try to get some kind of regulation in terms of subsidies for their EV programs, I would be willing to bet that when that time comes to talk about autonomy, you're going to see all the lobbyists in DC pushing for regulations that would favor the types of autonomous controls that hurt Tesla and help themselves. So I think that's will be the fight. There will be a bill put forward to try to allow autonomy, but I think you'll see anti-Elon people fighting for quote unquote safety regulations that just so happen to favor LiDAR or something stupid like that is not really necessary. What was your first question again?
Just around EV adoption. Same question around EV.
I think the biggest part there will be the reduction of regulations. And I think Elon will focus on just saying, hey, if we reduce innovation and regulations, we'll be able to adopt, more manufacturing here at home, drive costs down here at home. I think the real issue is this whole charger fiasco, all this money wasted on spending no chargers, when we all know that all the money for charging infrastructure should have gone to something like the Tesla supercharging network. And we all know that the broadband initiative money should have gone to something like SpaceX, because we would be having so many people like driving EVs. We'd have so many people online in rural areas. And that was something like 10 years ago when they were discussing this in the South Dakota House. I said, guys, we got SpaceX launching satellites. They're already doing rural broadband. Why don't we just put that money there? And nobody listened at the time, but it ended up being correct that like a tenth of the cost or less is what it would cost to have SpaceX. So
yeah,
that's my opinion. My opinion is just he'll focus on reducing regulation, and that will help EV adoption versus any other kind of subsidies.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Tyrone Mikulik, a member of the YouTube channel, says this is a great interview. And Isaac, thank you very much for coming up to speaker board. It wouldn't have happened if you didn't request to speak. And this is the beauty of TSLA Live, is that anybody can request to speak at any time. I have no idea what we're going to discuss really in a given day, or who's going to request or who's going to be available. And we're doing it live. So thank you so much for coming up to speak. We have a couple of other questions for you. And if you're enjoying this conversation, please hit the like button and subscribe to YouTube channel to help us grow, and share this space with your friends, family, and colleagues. Everybody, thank you very much. Bull 2035, go ahead, and then JB Capital.
Yeah, regarding current Congress members, Thomas Massey from Kentucky is a big Tesla fan. He's someone I like to follow. For the representative, are there any other members of Congress that you think we should be keeping an eye on for Tesla policy?
You hit it spot on with Massey. He is literally my favorite congressman, and I think probably the best one. I hope he doesn't leave Congress. I think that he'll probably be offered some role in the administration, but that's probably to get him out of the Congress where he tends to call people on the carpet for doing things that are corrupt. So I think he's the smartest member of Congress. I think he is the most honest. And like you said, like he disassembled a Model S himself and wired up a battery backup system for his house. So go and check out like all the YouTube videos on Massey. He is like literally my favorite congressperson and just an awesome dude all around. So as far as Congress people, I don't have anybody other than him that I really care about that much. But I know a few of them just from working, in the politics over the years, but I think he's doing the best job.
Thanks, Isaac. Bull, and then JB.
Yeah, for those into alternative energy, just understand if you don't know Thomas Massey, he's a representative. He's on the border of being a libertarian, I think it's fair. He's on the libertarian wing of the Republican Party, and he has alternative energy all over his house. Go to his Twitter, go to his website. It's really cool what he's done.
Thanks, Will. JB?
Thanks. I didn't know if you guys have already spoken about the Washington Post article about Elon Musk and Trump on the call. I don't want to waste your time if you've already discussed it.
We just mentioned it. Why? Do you have a question?
No, I have a comment. I think it's massive, and I also think just want to make the larger comment that with Tesla having Bitcoin on their books and America kind of coming back, there's really no reason to own Bitcoin over Tesla because you get a lot more tailwinds with Tesla. You get the cars, you get the robots, you get Bitcoin, you get everything in a very efficient country that's coming to run forward. So it just makes more sense. And I think that's why the S&P is reacting and Tesla's reacting very positively. And I think it'll go that way for the next next 3 months easily. That's my comment.
Hi, thank you, JB. Isaac, my final question to you is around the stock and cryptocurrency. I noted on your Wikipedia page that you also have a finance degree as well. Given your experience in politics and finance, are you buying Tesla shares here? Do you think the company is undervalued, overvalued, fairly valued? And have you made any changes since the Trump victory in this election?
No, I did have some option plays on the election, and I was able to catch a little bit of upside because I thought there would be a big move regardless of what happens. And to my, surprise and happiness, it went in a positive direction. But I've been a long-term Tesla holder for probably 10 years now, and I expect to keep holding on. I'm a believer in the autonomy valuation, so I'm waiting for that to materialize. And thank you very much for having me up. I do have to run back to work, but I appreciate you guys chatting and asking the questions.
All right. Thank you very much, Isaac. I appreciate it. All right. Nick or JC or anyone else, any thoughts around our discussion with Isaac?
I thought it was great. I really applaud him for coming up to the speaker board. Obviously, being a former congressman, 100% credibility on everything he's talking about there. And it's just refreshing to hear somebody from the Republican side talking about FSD, autonomy, EVs. That's nice.
Thank you. And Nick?
Yeah, I would like to hear him talk a little bit more, perhaps next time he comes on, about how hard it is, or how, he's kind of mentioned a little bit, but like some of the things that Trump's trying to push, like the term limits that affect all the Congress people. So that'd be interesting to hear and to see kind of who passes that or who doesn't. It'd just be an interesting comment.
Sure, we can talk about that next time he comes up. And this interview seems to have a lot of people seem to have liked it. Nick L in YouTube live chat says Isaac for president 2028. So there you go, Isaac, if you're still listening in the space. All right. With that, thank you very much, everybody. Tesla stock is $324 per share, up 9% today. Great day for Tesla investors, up about 30% in just a matter of a few days. And I will chat with you all next time. Enjoy your weekends. Tonight, I hope to host a Rivian earnings call watch party. I think that there's value in listening to earnings calls of other automakers to get insight into Tesla. So we're going to do that on YouTube. If you want to join us, like and subscribe through the link at the top of our screens. And I will send a link to speakers if they want to join me in doing this. This is going to happen in about 2 to 3 hours. I'll tweet out the actual timing. Nick?
Yeah, everyone, on your way out, please like and subscribe to the YouTube. We're trying to get to 200, so we need a couple more. So on your way out, we're trying to get to 200 likes.
All right, thanks, Nick. Thank you, everybody, and I'll chat with you all next time.